Many in the media feel that Donald Trump is being unfair to them when he says they are dishonest and biased against him. They insist that they are just telling the objective truth when they say he's a stinky poo-poo face who is making the Statue of Liberty cry by beating Mexicans to death with the bodies of innocent Muslims. The question is, are American journalists a collection of small-minded and corrupt elites so mesmerized by Democrat talking points they couldn't find their way to objectivity with a map and a flashlight because they're so busy raking in millions of dollars from their corporate overlords that they can't examine the belief systems that have turned them into low, narrow-minded, dishonest, and blithering buffoons? Or does it just sort of seem like that to everyone? The fact is, recent studies of American journalism since the election of Donald Trump have found that reporting has become so inaccurate that the phenomenon can only be accounted for by either dishonesty, hysteria, hysterical dishonesty, or dishonest hysteria, or hysterical dishonest hysteria about hysterical dishonesty. For instance, the New York Times, a former newspaper, recently ran a story headlined, "How Trump's Rush to Enact an Immigration Ban Unleashed Global Chaos." It later turned out there was no global chaos, although one New York Times editor was found running around in circles in the Times men's room until he ricocheted off the stalls. The editor later confessed he was upset because he had discovered he was a heterosexual male instead of a New York Times editor. In another instance, NBC reported that the Trump administration had eased sanctions on a Russian intelligence agency. It turned out that the sanction change was a small technical adjustment to free up trade. NBC corrected the story, saying they had made an honest mistake by lying because they were corrupt Democrats trying to give the impression that Trump was soft on Russia. The Washington Post's Josh Rogan published a bombshell report claiming that the State Department's entire senior management team had resigned, part of what Rogan called an ongoing mass exodus of senior Foreign Service officers who don't want to stick around for the Trump era. The story turned out to be completely false, and Rogan apologized, saying he had only meant to spread panic and discord and make the administration look bad because he hated them so much it made his stomach hurt and he couldn't sleep at night, and sometimes when he was in the shower, he would just cry and cry and cry. Other false stories from the media include Trump's threat to invade Mexico, which never happened, a Muslim woman who died without medical care because of Trump's travel pause, though she died before the order went out, and, of course, the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. that was never removed from the Oval Office. Some journalists have defended their error-filled reporting. CNN's Wolf Blitzer even went on the air to announce his support for his network, though he was jiggling his beard to spell out "help me" in Morse code. Wolf was later rescued and airlifted to an alternative universe where CNN news stories are true. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, ipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
Hooray! Hurrah! It's the Klavanless weekend is almost upon us, but Lindsay's here. Yay! Lindsay, come back and come over and say hello. Wave to everybody. Because this is the only reason people watch the show. There she is.
You.
I love you too. Welcome. How's Texas?
Good.
Yeah.
Still there?
Yeah. Well, thank God. So some people have jobs. That's why we need them. All right. I'm not joking about this press thing with there's mistaken reporting. Since Trump has been elected, it's getting almost impossible to know what stories are real. I'm so worried about coming on here and just saying this whole thing about something that happened yesterday and it didn't happen at all. John Nolte, the great Noltonator, is writing. His job now is just recording the mistakes, that the press makes. I used to think Nolte was an honorable guy, but the fact that he's taking money for that, I mean, that's got to be the easiest job in America. Here's what I'm wondering about, okay? I'm wondering if this domination, it's complete domination of the news media by the Democrats, it obviously creates this empire of lies for us all, and we're bombarded by these lies constantly. But now with Trump, nobody's listening to them anymore. And I'm wondering if what it is really doing is creating this alternative, dishonest, illusory universe for the Democrats so they can't tell what's going on. I mean, they may actually be hurting themselves by creating this atmosphere of falsehood that they themselves believe. back in one of the reasons I became an outspoken conservative, which was not that good for me, and made it very hard for me to work in Hollywood, where I was working quite a lot. But, they started to make these movies while our troops were in the field attacking the war on terror. So they would make films like Redaction and Lions for Lambs and other. I think there were like a dozen. Green Zone. In all of these films, America was the bad guy, and all of the films bombed, and they would bomb one after another. And the reason I started writing about it was I just thought it was wrong to make films against the war while the soldiers were actually being shot at. They didn't do that during the Vietnam War. All those famous anti-Vietnam War films were made after the war was over. While these films are coming out, and they're bombing, but they keep making them. It doesn't matter. Making them one after another after another. Variety, and the New York Times echoed this, I think. Variety wrote a piece saying, gee, Americans just aren't interested in the war on terror. They're just not interested in seeing movies about this. And I was like, do they really believe that? Because, of course, then American Sniper came out, which was about the fact that Americans were heroes in the war on terror, and it was one of the top-rated R-rated films ever made. I think it's number 5 on the list of box office hits of R-rated films. I thought, wow, these guys are so embedded in their own world that they think that them attacking America as the bad guys in a war against these medieval madmen, they think that people just aren't interested in the war. This happened just a few months ago. I had an idea for a Bible story, and I was talking to one of my agents, and he said, oh, they don't make Bible stories anymore. And I said, well, why not? Mel Gibson spent like 25 mil or something, and he made $1 billion on. Well, I said, they fail. Look at the Noah picture and Gods and Kings, the one about Moses. And I said, well, when they made Gods and Kings, Christian Bale went on Nightline and said Moses was like a terrorist. To the Egyptian empire, Moses was a terrorist, kind of comparing Moses to the Islamic terrorists who were attacking America. And when they made Noah, which was, for those of you who've never read the Bible, Noah is the world is destroyed because of sin. But in the movie, it's destroyed because we're not environmental enough. So, of course, the people who like the Bible, who believe in the Bible, and who love God and want to see these movies don't show up. And then Hollywood says to themselves, well, they don't like these movies. So they're living in this complete illusory universe. So watching the news yesterday, this is what brought this to my mind. I started to think like maybe the Democrats are so wrapped up in the media that they don't understand what the rest of us are seeing. Everybody between New York and L.A. And I'm starting to suspect that there are people in New York and L.A. who are seeing the same thing. So 2 big stories yesterday that the media is talking about. One is the judge, Neil Gorsuch, Trump's appointment to the Supreme Court, made a remark about Trump's remarks about judges because Trump's travel pause went before the Ninth Circuit. Trump felt the Ninth Circuit was being ridiculous. He went in front of law enforcement officers and he read the statute, which gives him almost unlimited power to ban travel if he thinks there's danger. And so play the Trump cut. This is Trump saying, like, how can they not understand this?
When you read something so perfectly written and so clear to anybody, and then you have lawyers, and I watched last night in amazement, and I heard things that I couldn't believe. Things that really had nothing to do with what I just read. And I don't ever want to call a court biased, so I won't call it biased. And we haven't had a decision yet. But courts seem to be so political, and it would be so great for our justice system if they would be able to read a statement and do what's right.
So he doesn't want to call them biased, but I'm not calling them biased, but he's calling them biased, right? Yesterday I was talking to a guy, he's kind of famous, he's on CNN, and he said, I was talking about the way Trump plays with the truth, the way he just kind of overstates things and all this. And this guy said, people know the difference between a BS artist and a liar. A liar says if you want to keep your health plan, you can keep your health plan, and then you can't. That's lying. A BS artist blows things up a little bit. He says this is going to be the best thing that ever happened. This is going to be, and he said Trump is a BS artist because he does what he says he's going to do. So he's not a liar. But he does BS a lot, and this is what's throwing the press off. And one of the things that what he said, there was a lot of truth to it. When people stood up, Byron York wrote about the arguments before the Ninth Circuit. He said one of the things that was so amazing was that both sides seemed to know nothing about some of the most basic real-world issues surrounding the case. He says the judge on the U.S. District Court who stopped the order believed that none of these countries that Trump has banned refugees from have had any effect, none of the people from those countries have committed terrorist attacks. And Robart asked a Justice Department lawyer, how many arrests have there been of foreign nationals from those 7 countries since 9/11? And the lawyer said he didn't know. Robart said, let me tell you, the answer to that is none, as best as I can tell. And what he was getting information from CNN. But the fact is, that's not true. Okay, they have committed acts of terror, and they have been arrested, and people have been, these are some of the guys who are on the law enforcement's radar. Okay, so Neil Gorsuch is making the rounds on Capitol Hill. He's talking to a senator. He talks to a Democratic senator, Rosenthal, and Richard Rosenthal. I think he's from Connecticut. And Rosenthal now goes before the press and tells the press what what Gorsuch said in these private conversations.
I said to Judge Gorsuch that I find these attacks on the judiciary absolutely abhorrent and unacceptable, and I asked him to express his criticism and to condemn these kinds of public attacks on an independent judiciary. And at that point, after some back and forth, he did say that he found them to be disheartening and demoralizing. But my view is this condemnation has to be public, direct, explicit, because he has to show the American people that he will be independent, more than just a rubber stamp, for a president who has launched a series of blistering and bullying attacks on the American courts, anticipating, in fact, to blame them for any terrorist incident that may occur if his side of this case on the immigration ban is not upheld.
So the New York Times, which has been doing this really interesting thing, I wake up every morning, about 5:30 in the morning, and the first thing I do is I read the Bible a little bit, and then the next thing I do is I look at the New York Times. I do this so you don't have to. This is the kind of selfless thing I do for you people. I read the New York Times so you don't have to. And they are so biased. But later, when I go back and look at the stories, they've all been fiddled with. They change them because I'm reading it online, so they can change it without leaving any trace of the fact. Yes. So today, this is how they covered this story. Trump shoots the messenger. I called him Rosenthal. His name is Senator Blumenthal. That was my mistake. Sorry. Senator Blumenthal. Trump shoots the messenger because what Trump did was he complained about the fact that Blumenthal came out and talked about what was a private conversation, which is not the typical thing. Usually these appointees can go and talk to the senators and know that they're protected. There's a private conversation. But Blumenthal wanted everyone to know this was going on. So they said, their headline is Trump shoots the messenger. And they say it was a bit of a kiss and tell moment. It's not serious that he violated this confidence, but it's a bit of. He says the account was readily confirmed, but that wasn't enough to stop the president from going after Mr. Blumenthal where it hurt. And Trump then tweeted, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who never fought in Vietnam when he said for years he had, major lie, now misrepresents what Judge Gorsuch told him. The Times then goes on to say the president was referring to 2010 news broken in the New York Times, a media outlet he has openly criticized. So in other words, we got the story, but he criticized us, but now he's quoting us. This is a news story. This is not an editorial. That Mr. Blumenthal had exaggerated his Vietnam-era service. Now, when I woke up this morning at 5:30, there was a line after that said, Trump never served either because of that bad foot of his. Ha, ha, ha. As if that had anything to do with lying about your service. I never served, but I'm going around telling people that, when I was in Nam, it's like that's a lot different. Personally, and again, this is just me saying this. I don't know what the rest of the people are saying. I thought really well of Trump, that he was offended that he didn't say, Gorsuch shouldn't have said that. Gorsuch shouldn't have attacked what I was saying. I mean, do you remember when he announced Gorsuch's appointment, he shook hands with him. I don't have the video with me now, but he shook hands and he tried to pull Gorsuch into this, into a handshake, like he was going to pull him and put his arm around him, and Gorsuch wouldn't move, because this guy, so he stands up for himself. He holds his ground, right? And Trump has let all his appointees do that. He's let all his appointees disagree with him. I mean, this looks good to me when a judge who we want to be, obviously, we want him to be independent, we want him to do what he has to do on the Supreme Court, that Trump isn't saying he shouldn't have said that. He's attacking the senator. I thought it looked good. And, well, you know what? I got to stop and say goodbye to people on Facebook and YouTube. So you can come over to thedailywire.com and hear the rest. But if you want to watch the rest, you got to subscribe. You got to subscribe. And you could have been on the mailbag. You've missed another week. And I know, another lousy week without your life being changed by the answers you get in the mailbag. That was fun, the mailbag this week. It's always good. So come on over to thedailywire.com. Shell out a lousy $8, and we'll also send you a terrific film, The Arroyo. Yeah, that's what a deal.